It
All
says live.
right. It says we're live. Hi, everybody. This is State Representative Roger Bruce. And I am out at the lovely Sweetwater Creek State Park today. I came out here with my mom. I wanted to make sure that she got out of the house and got a little sunshine. And so we're sitting out here at the park watching the birds go by and people trying to catch fish. But anyway, um, one of our colleagues is not feeling well. I'm not sure if she's going to join us. If she does, we'll just patch her in. Deborah Bazemore, Representative Bazemore. So hopefully she'll be able to join us. But if not, she told us she wasn't feeling well. And so Derek and Senator, what do you guys want to say before we get started?
Well, I just want to say I'm in the car. So like Derek, Representative Jackson, he's the one in the car usually. This week, I'm the one in the car. I am in South Fulton at the Old National, and I have an event to go to just after this. It's a food giveaway, and so I am in my car, but I'd like to be out in a park where you are. I should have thought of that, but there's a lot of loud music behind me, so I am sitting in my car, so you all don't have to deal with that.
Who's giving away food?
So Councilman Mark Baker is doing a food giveaway, and he's doing kind of a talk about, community issues. And so I'm here just out. It's the LA Fitness strip off of Old National. And so that's where the event is. So I'm going to head to that once we get done talking to our great viewers here.
All right, Derek.
Well, listen, it's Friday, and when it's Friday, it's Under the Gold Dome time, and it's just great that I'm in the studio and you two are on location. So, we got the video to prove that I'm not the only busiest legislator under the Gold Dome, but it's great, as Senator Halpern said, that even after the session, we're still doing the work for the people and of the people. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
All right. This week we've had, this year and years gone by, we've had a lot of issues with law enforcement. We've had a lot of issues with the law enforcement people taking the lives of some of our young people and creating a situation that we have two pandemics going on at the same time. One medically, and the other one, with our children being killed by law enforcement. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about a few of the bills that were introduced and some of the things. But this goes way back. When we start talking about law enforcement, one of the bills that, we've talked about it in the past, but we're just going to mention it again real quick, is dealing with people being able to arrest other citizens arrest. And we just repealed the citizens arrest law, but the origin of that legislation goes way back to slavery, when they were able to allow people to capture slaves that had escaped, and hold them until the slave master came back and got them. And that's where that originated. And, for that to last all of these years, and it evolved, where people were using it as an excuse to shoot other people or to detain them in some way or another. I was glad to see my colleagues finally step up and say, we're not going to do that anymore. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the two of you to talk about some of the bills that you guys wanted to talk about relative to this subject matter.
Representative, I'll let you lead.
I'm glad we yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad we're putting this in context, because it's amazing that the other party always, when we have this conversation around policing, they immediately want to say one of two things. Either they say Democrats is about defunding the police, which that is far from the truth. No one talks about defunding the police. We always want our police to have the training and resources to respond accordingly. I mean, just in the last 24 hours, we saw this horrific incident at a FedEx facility up in Indianapolis where 8 citizens were killed by the alleged shooter, and the police had to respond. Right, so we're not talking about defunding the police. The other part is that always come up is gun safety. Right, we talk about gun safety, and there's something to be said when 90% of citizens, right? When I say 90%, I'm talking about Republicans, Democrats, and Independent, want us to make sure that those who the use of a gun use it responsibly, right? And when you look at what just took place just recently, where a police officer took the life of a young man, 20 years of age, father, Dante is who I'm referencing, and the police officer yells, taser, 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 knowing that she had a gun in her hand. A taser and a gun do not look alike. The manufacturers made sure that tasers and guns do not look alike. And there's been several photos to compare a small arm and a taser. And so today's conversation is and rightfully so, we should be talking about the fatal police shootings in the United States, right? Last year, and I had to look up the statistics, over 1,021 fatal police shootings took place in the United States. Over 1,021. Now you're probably saying, well, that seems like a big number only when we hear about, 5 or 6, right? George Floyd, Dante, and the most recent ones. But because everybody gets these, everybody's walking around with a smart device, and every mobile phone is a camera. But some of them are just egregious. I think none of them should be warranted, right? But I'm glad Representative Bruce provided the historical context, because over 150 years ago, sheriffs would deputize citizens to go and get escaped slaves. Now, why are we talking about citizens' arrests and fatal police shootings? Because the same behavior and mindset exists with both individuals, because some believe that they have to take matters into their own hands. But coincidentally, it only appears that when it involves someone of color, black and brown, that the results always end up in a fatality. Just in the last 14 hours, I watched a video where a Caucasian man berates the police officer, yells and screams at the police officer, tells them, I am not getting out my vehicle, slams the car door back, tell them I got a small arm, you're not going to take my small arm. And then the citizen demands the 2 police officers lower their weapons. One of the police officers put their gun, their small arm, back into their holster. And so the results are very stark. And we always talk about being in compliance. One of the parts that we need to talk about as today's topic, and we love to get our audience questions on this, and that is this: when is enough praying is enough? When is enough Hashtag. When are we going to do our last candlelight vigil? Right? That's, if you think about the origin of Black Lives Matter, right? That organization started, I want to say 2013. It was because some citizens of color said enough is enough. No more praying. We want action. We're exhausted of being killed on the streets. And so, yes, Representative Bruce, you are right. We try to pass legislation to change this behavior in our environment. And we need to do more because we don't need directly or indirectly someone that we may know to fall victim or become another statistic in this egregious trend of fatal police shootings.
All right.
Yeah, they're so part of the problem, right, of course, is that just as Representative laid out, and we do need to have policing, and at the same time, we also need to feel, I mean, as a people, that we will be treated with humanity, with dignity, with respect. We need to feel as though we are, by the color of our skin, not going to be a threat. Like, we are just showing up as in our Black skin considered a threat often, and it escalates quickly. And so we saw even yesterday I actually did not watch because I refuse to watch any of these videos. I actually, for my own mental health, cannot watch these videos that get released. I'm grateful that there is video footage because I think it does force people to understand that this is what is really happening and been happening. And for folks who have a hard time believing that this could be the case, the video really forces them to contend with some of the things that we as Black moms and Black dads and have been living with for centuries, quite frankly. But even yesterday's fatal shooting of the young 13-year-old in Chicago by police, it is another proof point that we need to think about policing in a completely new way, and that kind of immediate reaction to shoot is just something that we take out of the culture of policing. I'm looking at a comment by Richard Scott who says the entire police culture needs to change. And I think that that's right. I mean, the whole thing that we need is to make sure that our police are trained in de-escalation tactics, are trained in anti-bias curriculum, are trained in sensitivity, and so that, they're able to approach similar situations the same way. You just, Representative Jackson, referenced the scenario where the one driver who was white was berating the officers, even when they are armed, are able to drive away and remain unharmed during their interaction. And we do need to have that same level of confidence that that's what's going to be happening with us. And statistically, it just more often than not, that's not the case. It's just simply not the case. And so the defund the police kind of mantra that we started hearing coming out of last summer's protests, particularly after the death of George Floyd. And then there were several that happened kind of back to back, right immediately after that, including right here in Atlanta. And so there is, in fact, a large group of people, I think, who, or maybe not large, but there is a percentage of people who are giving voice to this idea that we do need to defund the police. I will say this, and I'm not one to call for that. I have had my house broken into. I've had an apartment broken into. I've had people try to, kick their door through my back door. I actually, call the police when those things are happening. I don't call for defunding them. But for sure, that kind of the language around defunding the police did in fact precipitate some legislation just this past session that I think that we should mention if we haven't talked about it before, because there was legislation and it did pass. It's waiting governor's signature, I believe. And I don't have the bill number, so I'm sorry about that. But effectively, it would not allow local legislations to reduce their budget in the police department more than 5% based on the prior year's kind of budget line and revenue. And so it really very specifically codifies and spells out that local jurisdictions can only reduce that police department funds by X amount maximum. And so you all should just know that that is definitely legislation that is in response to some of the messaging and the language and the protest of last summer.
Yeah, it's kind of an unusual situation, for them to get in one breath, they're saying that they want to stay out of local government, but at the same time, they're doing all kinds of stuff to interfere with local government. And as you said, none of us are talking about defunding the police. None of us are talking about doing anything that reduces the police protection. But that's not the issue. We're glad to see the police do their job. We're just not glad to see them not do their job, which is what we are seeing. They are out shooting people for no reason at all. The case that's pending now that I think that's got most people's attention. This officer put his knee on that gentleman's neck, and he kept it there. The man kept saying, "I cannot breathe. I cannot breathe. I cannot breathe." And they ignored that. They ignored all of the things that would have kept him alive. Now, their defense, which is amazing to me, is that they didn't feel like he did anything wrong because this guy had, other issues, and that he would have probably died from these other issues. There's nothing to show that. There's absolutely nothing to show that. And the witnesses that they brought on for that particular trial, the witnesses for the defense, they're trying to make it seem like that the victim did something to cause his death, and there's nothing to support that. So I don't get it. We're on a new platform today, so I know we had some comments and questions, but I don't know if we can see them. Can you see them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
well,
we can see them. I just want to provide the audience the House bill that Senator Halperin was talking about was House Bill 286. That's the one that restricts the local municipality in terms of their funding to their budget when it comes down to law enforcement. But we do have a question from Ms. Voncille McQueen, and we appreciate your question, Ms. McQueen. Her question is around qualified immunity. Now, if you think about that qualified immunity, that's what, again, going back to the historical point, right? When you think about why are we giving this type of immunity to law enforcement, we don't give it to doctors, nurses, any other professional, right? If a doctor make a mistake and do something wrong, it would be considered a malpractice lawsuit, but they don't have no immunity, right? And so why do we have qualified immunity for police officers? We don't have it for firefighters. We definitely don't have it for military. And there's been several times where the bomb or the missile then goes somewhere where it should not go, right? And so I think to the point that Mr. Richard Scott brought up, we do need to change the entire environment and culture around policing in America. Should a police officer, and I ask this to my esteemed colleagues, should a police officer pull us over if you have an expired tag? They have all the information. Just send us the fine in the mail when we open up the bill and it says you're driving around with an expired tag. You pay X number of dollars. And if you don't pay X number of dollars by such day, we're going to have a warrant for your arrest, right? Do you need to pull over a citizen for expired tags?
Right. I mean, I would argue that, and this is the thing, right? What are things that police should be doing? What are the kinds of things that we believe that they should be focused on? And what are the things that we think can be handled in a different way? I mean, I would say that tags really probably can be handled a different way. But even now, today, even though law enforcement is responsible for making sure that they pull me over when my tag is expired, which did happen to me like last October, I should not feel threatened, right? So there's the two pieces of it. Like, are we looking to have them do different things because their time would be better spent on other kinds of activities? And I think the answer is yes to that, right? Their time is better spent on other kinds of activities. And at the same time, until we figure out a way to make those transitions, and those are decisions that really are made, kind of locally, and not globally, unfortunately, right? So you've got the local, you've got the state, but globally, that's not happening kind of across the country. And so how do we, in the meantime, ensure that those kinds of stops don't become deadly? I mean, really, you're talking about expired tags and an air freshener for Daunte Wright. I mean, it's just that's really excessive. It's just excessive. So I do think that there are some things that we don't necessarily need our police to do any longer. And I think that there's other kinds of agencies and stuff that could handle some of the duties that right now are assigned to law enforcement. But it will take a huge kind of coordinated effort to make sure that that the community at large and the agencies really are able to do the work that we now are assigning to them that they've not had before as their primary responsibility. Not that it can't be done. I'm just saying there is some coordination that will need to happen to make that happen. I'll say too that some of this is really comes down to a little bit, even some federal oversight. I mean, I will tell you that when President Obama was president, the Attorney General's office, that kind of Department of Justice, there was a lot of work that they actually did over the course of 8 years, specifically around policing. Specifically around the idea of community policing, incentivizing different local jurisdictions and states, quite honestly, to move towards looking at law enforcement in a different kind of a way. There was some headway that was really starting, but again, it was incentivized, which is fine, right? Whatever it takes to start it. But then in the last 4 years, of course, that work has completely been annihilated because the priority wasn't put there, and without without kind of oversight around it, it's some of the work actually did stop happening altogether.
I'm up here reading some of the comments, and Miss Ellen Miller Mapp really sums it up for me personally. Her comment, and thank you, Miss Mapp, for your comment. She says, sadly, every time I see a police car, I conduct a mental self-check, my speed, my phone, and my attitude just in case. It's just the nature of concern and distrust. No citizen, white, black, Hispanic, no citizen should feel intimidated when they see the police officer. But I get exactly what Miss Ellen Miller Mapp is talking about, right? You can not be doing nothing wrong. You see a police officer, your blood pressure goes up, you're checking your speed because you don't want to be the 6 o'clock news. And nobody wants to be another hashtag. No one needs to have another candlelight vigil. And so we have to change this culture. We have to. And again, in full transparency, I have nieces and nephews that are in law enforcement, right? They do a phenomenal job. I'm not saying that because they're in my family. I'm just saying they follow the letter to the law for everyone, regardless of your skin tone. But we do have some bad apples out there, Senator. We got some bad apples out there, Representative Bruce. We have to do a mental evaluation. We do it in the military. We do it in other professions. Why not do it with the police officers? How can a 26-year vet confuse a taser and a gun? And oh yeah, by the way, this 26-year vet is the training officer. My nieces and nephews say, Unc, there's no way I could confuse my gun, my service weapon, and my taser because the way they train them and how they got to go across their waist. And I mean, he was explaining all these different techniques. And I'm saying to myself, there's no way possible.
Even in that particular instance that you just referred to, why was she even trying to tase him? I mean, he wasn't armed. He had his hands up. So why was she even trying to tase him?
Well, it's like what one of our audience members said, unfortunately. I want to make sure I quote the correct person. Mr. Rodney James Littles said, "We are endangered species." Immediately when they see someone that looks like us, a different thought process goes through their mind. I don't know what part, and this is not always training. And that's why I always tell my Republican friends, stop saying training, because we see a different result when they pull over someone that looks like them compared to someone that looks like my grandson, that looks like Senator Halperin's son, right? This should be the same thought process, the same intermediate steps. We all know what deadly force is, but it should not be the default when you see someone that's 6'2", 200 pounds. That's me. That's 6'2", 200 pounds. You should not be intimidated. You simply, I pull over, we have the talk, right? I know exactly where to place my hands, right? Right? To make sure that I am not considered a threat. But we watched a police officer pulled over a military officer, an Army lieutenant, in uniform. In uniform, Representative Bruce. He's in uniform. I don't know how less threatening could one be. You're in uniform and you get pepper sprayed and you get treated like a second-class citizen. This, I do not apologize for my emotions right now. That is a military member. No citizen, don't get me wrong, no citizen, but they're in uniform. So what threat are you looking at other than the man's color? We watched a young man walking in his neighborhood, and then the Caucasian man tells him, "Why are you in this neighborhood? Get from off this sidewalk. Leave or I will carry you out." I'm like, what is this, the United States of America? Is this United States of America?
You know, on my way over to the park today, you know, I told you guys I got my mom with me, and on the way over here, we were talking about, you know, I don't want to put her age out there, but you know, let's just say in the 30s, and she was telling me about, you know, when she came to the South and had to deal with the issues of segregation and, you know, white only facilities and all kinds of stuff like that. And you know, as she was talking to me about that, I couldn't help but feel like we are dealing with the same crap right now. It's got a different face on it. It's got a different, you know, appearance, but it's the same stuff. You know, we are dealing with people who have difficulty with dealing with other people that are not just like them. And while we can, you know, call this all the things that we've been calling it, what it is it's purely racism. It's people that are filled with hatred for people that are not like them, and they probably can't even explain why. I mean, you know, they probably can't explain it. To your point, you know, a moment ago, Derek, you know, they can't explain what's wrong. So I guess, you know, one of the things, you know, we're, you know, going on the second half of the program. I would love to hear from some of our viewers. If you've experienced something yourself, tell us about what that was. I think it would be interesting to see what's happening. I personally had several instances. There was over here in Douglas County. My wife and my daughter and I pulled up into Walmart, and we were in my van. There's a TV in the van, and I just chose not to go into the store with them. You know, I just sat in the van. And I was watching TV, and officers came and knocked on the van, knocked on the door, and I didn't think anything was wrong, so I just said, "Yeah, can I help you?" And they said, "Yeah, get out of the van." And I said, "Why?" And they wouldn't tell me why, And I got out, had my hands up because I didn't know what was going on. They threw me up against my van, and my wife and my daughter, started walking out. Didn't know what was going on. They got close by. They told them to back up, and go away. And they never told me what they pulled me over for. Then another officer came, a female officer, and she whispered something to the guy. And I'm assuming she whispered, "You got the wrong one," because they came over and they said, "You can go." They never, ever told me why I was detained in the first place. They never apologized for what they did. And what I found out later was that there was a white female that had complained that some black man had said something to her that she didn't like. And I was a black man, and that's what it was. That's one of several instances that I had. What about you guys? Have y'all experienced something like that?
So I worry for my sons, right? I've got a 17-year-old son and a 13-year-old. My 17-year-old is driving. He was walking just up the street to go to the school. It's an elementary school, but they have like fields. And so he and a friend of his, another young African-American male, were walking up the street with their soccer bag with balls in the bag. And I don't know why the police stopped them to just say, "Where are you going and what are you doing?" Like, they're walking up the street with a soccer bag. And so I don't think anybody called to complain about them, but I think that there was some assumption around, like, what are these two black kids doing in this particular neighborhood, walking up the street, and decided to just stop them. Nothing happened, but it made me so mad because they were just minding their business. They weren't clowning around. They weren't doing anything but walking up the street. And when this is a lot of years ago, I know that I had a play brother when I was in high school, and we were driving up the highway. So we were going fast, but we were not speeding up the highway. And I used to smoke cigarettes. So I used to smoke, but I used to smoke like the thin ones. But we're on the highway driving. We got pulled over because the police officer said that he thought that we were like getting high in the car because he thought that he saw a cigarette, which is unlikely, and he thought it was thin enough to actually be a joint. Totally unlikely, like not possible at all. But my friend is a big guy. So like the thing is, you might see him driving by and recognize him to be a big guy, right? Of stature and size and muscle. I just we talk about these things, and the problem is that even for us as legislators, I think, and we can talk about, because we have some other bills that we co-sponsored, me on the Senate side, y'all on the House side. The thing is that there is such a interconnection between things that even in trying to deal with things like I co-sponsored a bill. I co-sponsored a few bills this session. So one of them was around, and I saw somebody mention this. I'm going to find the comment, to create a Georgia Law Enforcement Citizens Review Council, so that if a situation involving law enforcement happens, that you've got a Citizens Review Council that is also looking at that. There's another one that I co-sponsored, which was SB 131, that would appoint a prosecuting attorney when the accused is a law enforcement officer, charged with a felony or an act of family violence, like getting it out of law enforcement really managing law enforcement, right, and overseeing and deciding the penalties on law enforcement. The thing is that we can drop this legislation. These two went nowhere. They got assigned to public safety and then never got a hearing. They never went anywhere. I mean, we'll revisit them next year. But even if they had, the thing is that we're dealing with things like on a one-off basis, when the truth is that there's a whole entire kind of system that needs to change. So it's not just, oh, we need to ban chokeholds, which is another bill I co-sponsored, and we do need to ban them. But that's not the same as understanding that, like, our community, like, somebody mentioned community policing, which I think Richard Scott, which is a very important point. And it is one of the things, when I mentioned before, under President Obama, some of the work that they were trying to do that. But let's be honest, right? Like, most of the police oftentimes don't live in the communities in which they're assigned to work and police. We've got another issue in this country, and certainly in our districts, around affordable housing. And so when you look at where are officers living versus where are they working, there are other, I'm not making excuses for behavior. I'm just saying there are other things that come into play if we want to talk about community policing and making that something that can be possible these days, right? So there's a kind of whole systemic thing that needs to change, in addition to, like, how do cops respond to Black and brown people? But in order to achieve some of the changes that we might want to make and would dramatically make a difference, there's a lot of other factors that would need to be changing also, that a single piece of legislation can't address.
It looks like Miss McQueen wanted to share her son's story.
Yes. So, when you think about, in response to your question, Representative Bruce, even our own esteemed executive producer, Kevin Pride, asked that the perfect question: why does it seem like all Black men can identify with the story that Senator Halpern was sharing, especially when it comes around a 17-year-old, like her son, 17. But Ms. McQueen also states, thank you, Ms. McQueen, for your response to Representative Bruce. A police pulled my son over and asked him, why was he in our neighborhood? I have instructed him to call my husband or me if he's ever pulled over. I've asked him to put a camera in his car. I have find my app on my phone so that I can know where both of my kids are at all times, especially my son. This is beyond out of control. No mother no father should have this level of concern. I remember growing up, right? I'm much younger than Representative Bruce. Where my mother would say, "Go outside and play, Derek." Right? She wasn't thinking about no police killing me. She was like, "Go outside and play." Right? And that's what we did. But here we are. We fast forward. Most mothers and fathers would say, you know, what can we do to entertain you to stay at home? Right? Because, and I want to go back to Senator Halpern's story for a second. Why is it that when we're smoking, and I don't smoke, never smoke, but we're smoking, it's construed as a marijuana. Mm-hmm. Everybody else smoke, it's a cigarette. Mm-hmm. Why is that? That is not part of police officer training, right? A broken tail light. I've been pulled over for a broken tail light. The bulb could have just went out 30 seconds, right? Police officer pulls you over, license registration. Okay, can you tell me why you pulled me over? I don't have a problem giving you my license registration. I don't ride dirty. So I'm gonna give, but you need to still explain to me, right? Because I don't want to end up like what Representative Bruce said. You interrogating, you don't say why. The citizens have a right to know why they're being questioned by law enforcement. This is not being confrontational. I'm just asking a question. Mr. Officer, Mrs. Officer, can you tell me why you're pulling over? Here's my license registration, but you still need to tell me why you pulled me over, right? Is this one of those, as Congresswoman Maxine Waters said, we can't walk while black, we can't jog around our neighborhood while black, we can't go get Skittles while black. What do you want?
It looks like Miss McCray had McKay. She wanted to share her son's story too.
Okay, let me find Miss Cheryl McKay. You said. Okay, yeah. So Miss Cheryl McKay, her story is: my son had an issue. Him and a group of teens were standing outside. The police said they found some marijuana in the bushes, and because of some law called the lounging law, they took everyone to jail because everyone there was in the lounging distance. Have you heard of the lounging law?
I have not.
I haven't heard that one, but I wouldn't be surprised. And if there was one.
Well, and this is part of the problem, right? Because, you know, we pass laws, they're signed into law, and then you don't necessarily know that they even exist, right? So, like, why is there even like the air freshener situation? Why is there a law about the air freshener, right? Like, really, I understand obstruction of the mirrors and the view, but like an air freshener is not that. So it's like there's also these laws, and we do, and this is partly why shows like Under the Gold Dome, like we do try to talk about lots of different kinds of issues. We try to share what's happening, certainly during the legislative session, about the laws that are passing, to give people some insight into what now is in existence. But this lounging law is actually, I've written it down now because now I'm going to have to look it up and see what that is and see how it
looked like she corrected it. It wasn't lounging, it was lunging.
Lunging. Okay. So lunging. I'll look that up too.
I don't know what that is either.
Never heard of that.
Yeah. It looks like Richard Scott has something there too.
Okay. Richard Scott, our friend Richard Scott says, if an officer requests anything other than your license, insurance, and vehicle registration, then request a police supervisor and don't say anything else. Give them the license, insurance, and vehicle registration and reserve your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent.
Okay.
But here's the thing though. And I
I
appreciate.
know Richard. I wonder if he's talking from experience there.
but here's the thing though, and I appreciate Richard Scott sharing this, right? How often, and I would love for Senator Halperin, because I have all daughters, but I would love to get her perspective, being that she has two sons. How often we have to talk in terms of how to respond. I mean, I think we go through a plethora of scenarios, right? Not just driving. I think when we tell our children, when you go to the mall or you just hanging out on the local area, right? We go through in the most exhaustive way of making sure that we plant a seed in our children's mind on how to respond to law enforcement if they encounter law enforcement. And so we can do exactly what Mr. Richard Scott is suggesting in terms of, knowing your rights and Fifth Amendment and all that. But Sandra Bland didn't have that opportunity. George Floyd didn't get that opportunity. And the list goes on. So, Senator, when you have a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old and they want to go to the mall or hang out with their friends or ride their bikes in the neighborhood, I mean, share from a motherly perspective, right? Put your senator hat down for a second and share from a motherly perspective that feeling that Miss Cheryl McKay and Miss Von Seal McQueen is talking about for our audience.
So the thing is that there's very few times, there's very few times, if I really think about it, when my son is walking out of the house that there's not some level of me saying, like, be safe. Notice what's happening around you, right? Like there's always that underlying kind of, hey, know what's happening around you. Even at the mall, my son, the same 17-year-old, he must have been, maybe this was 2 years ago. He was in the mall in Florida on a soccer tournament and was with other people on his team, some of whom were African American and a couple were Caucasian. And some of the boys, and my son was not nowhere near around it. He had walked off with another friend, but some of the boys started throwing an empty water bottle down the escalator. And they actually almost hit a woman. Turns out the woman's husband was in law enforcement. So he didn't like that too tough. And so he came up and he was really like, kind of basically getting the boys and wasn't going to let them go anywhere. And one of them called, his dad. And then my husband was just coming up anyway at that same time. And my son happened to come back around. My son, he's taught always to be super polite. So, yes, sir. No, sir. Law enforcement. Yes, sir. No, sir. After that situation, we also had a whole conversation around, like, you gotta be careful who you're with too, because some of the white kids that he happened to have been with there, they were mouthy, so bad. And those kids, my fear, that escalates a situation. And my kid is not going to get the same kind of grace that those kids who actually escalate the situation are going to get. So then we started having to have conversations around, like, know who your friends are. Like, and it's okay to have different kinds of friends. Like, this is one who's super fun, but like not to go to the mall with, you know what I mean? Not to be in a situation that can get tense. That's not the person you're going to want to be with. So kind of start to categorize a little bit the people the people you're hanging out with. I mean, it's a lot to say and try to explain to a 15-year-old who's like, a friend is a friend, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's how do you respond? And even Richard Scott's suggestion, like, I think you're right. License, insurance, and vehicle registration. But I don't know that I can give my son that advice, because I think as a 17-year-old, he's not like a grown man can take the position in a different kind of a way than a young man can, right? Who's just trying to come into their own. And a law enforcement officer, may not allow my son to be quite so steadfast in his, knowledge of the law. So it's really dicey, because there are a lot of times when I don't know exactly what to even suggest, because you just don't know who you're going to run up on and how they're going to take you.
Yeah. Right. We've got about 3 minutes or so left. One of the things that I want to do is ask the audience, to give us any suggestions they might have on future programs, so that we are hitting topics that you genuinely have an interest in. We end up talking amongst ourselves about things that we have an interest in, but we want to hear from you too. So if you could, all of you that are on there, that are on right now, just take a second and send us a suggestion for future topics. And it could be anything. One of the things that we talked about doing was, a lot of people don't know what state government actually does. We have a lot of different departments that do a lot of different things. So, we talked about 1 week, just each of us picking a department and talking about what that department does and how you as a citizen can benefit from interacting with that department. Again, what we're trying to do is educate you about what's going on with state government and around our state. But that could be a topic. Let me know what you think about that, and any topics that you think we should cover. Did the two of you have some things you want to throw out to see if people have anything?
I was going to say only that we are out of session. And so even in this kind of off season, we intend to be with you and do these Under the Dome talks. And so we do have a huge opportunity through, out the rest of this year to really talk about the things that interest you, to bring forward guests to join us, to even delve deeper into those topics. And truthfully, there are some topics that, could be a 2 or 3 part series, that we do for a couple of weeks in a row and bring additional people to join us to really delve deeply into it. So the more you let us know where your interests lie, the more that we can make sure that we can help frame a conversation and get you the kind of answers that would be meaningful.
Yeah. And before we put a pin on the policing in America, our friend Sandra Rozier says it very well. We need to have the talk with both our sons and our daughters. And I want also, before we close out, Miss Voncille McQueen and Miss Ellen Miller Mapp posed 2 good questions that I want you all's perspective on. And Miss McQueen says, so what's the plan? How do we resolve this? Do we need to reach out to President Biden and Vice President Harris? This is an epidemic, right? Folks are getting tired of those that look like us being killed. And then Miss Mapp says, how can we regain the trust with the police when the practices of qualified immunity continue to award bad behavior? And so these are questions. Maybe we need to have a part 2 to policing in America, right? But I think we got these very tough questions to ask, because we're seeing the pain of family. It looks like every day, right? This frequency is every day. When you look at over 1,000 police killings last year, and currently about 213 in 2021. And so this is real, and maybe we need to maybe invite some of our law enforcement friends on under the Gold Dome and have this kind of conversation as well.
All right. Well, that looks like we're about right out of time. Any last comments, Senator?
No, thank you for joining us again this Friday afternoon. We appreciate the conversation. I hope you all, for anybody who's been here before, I hope you like our new kind of setup and format. We're using a different platform, which I think allows us to even be much more interactive. And so hopefully you felt that today. We continue to improve the experience. I have written down hello, Deborah Fields Harris. I've written down her suggestions and Richard Scott's suggestions for future, and Phil Looney's also. So we've noted those, and we will at some point come back and actually delve into those topics. You can be guaranteed that.
And make sure you tune in next week. We didn't forget, we got a special announcement on April 23rd. Yeah. Big announcement. You better tune in, tell your family, your friends. I mean, you do not want to miss the Gold Dome show next week, because we got this announcement is so big, it's bigger than Representative Bruce's name in Georgia.
All right. Well, I want to make sure that we got all of the suggestions. Is there, I'm out in the park, so I can't print anything. Are we sure that before we sign off that we have all of the suggestions so that we don't lose any of them?
I know the executive producer got it. Our executive producer printing them.
He does have it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, with that, I want to say
Senator Halpern got them too.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I see that pen moving. She got some copious notes going.
All right. Well, I want to say thank you to everybody. I really enjoy doing Under This Gold Dome because it gives us a chance to directly interact with people. And we hope that you are getting something from it and that you will encourage others to watch. It makes us feel good to know that people are watching, for one thing. And it also makes us feel good to know that we are educating people about things that they may not have otherwise had knowledge of. So with that, once again, thanks for joining us. See you next week. Where?
Under the Gold Dome.
All right. Peace. All right. Are we?
No, you're still live.
Okay. Deborah Harris is still sending us stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us again this week.
I like this new format.